Hello, my name is Sue Pruett, and I'm going to show you a new painting technique. We're going to do some blending exercise today. First thing I'm going to have out on my palette is I'm going to have out some gray values. This is the gray number 8, gray number 6, gray number 3, and also some black. So you definitely need to have some value changes, whether you're using this grayscale or if you're using colored values of red or blue or so forth. You still need some value changes within your colors. Next thing I'm going to have is some brushes. I have a large brush to put my extender on with. I have a number 10 filbert to apply the paint and do some blending with that paint. I also have a blender brush, which is going to help me soften some underblended lines, which we'll go into as we see those. So first thing I'm going to do is take some extender, some clean extender, put that onto my surface to help the blending go easier so the paint just doesn't go onto the surface and grab. And I'm going to work this in very well. I'm going to go beyond the size of the object. See, my circle is right here. I can barely see it now with the extender on it. Not too wet. If I get it too wet, one thing you can do is just take a paper towel. You can either keep going back and forth like I'm doing, or you can take a paper towel and you can blot off the excess, and that should be just about right. Now the paints that we're going to use today are the Traditions paints, but they're in the global method. That's easier for blending as they will have a longer open time. So I'm going to put my filbert brush into some extender, and then I'm going to pinch out the excess. Just want a little bit of moisture in here. Don't want it too wet, just as if it was water. You know, when you moisten your brush with water, you don't leave it dripping out. It's just moist. I'm also going to have some small paper towels in my hand. I like to cut these paper towels in small pieces. Then I fold it over, and what I do with that is I keep it in my opposite hand if I'm painting in, and when I get a little too much paint on my brush, I'm going to pinch the brush out. See, it just makes it very nice and handy to have it in your hand. Okay, I'm going to go over to, let's go ahead and put it into the value number 6. And I'm just going to work it into the brush, back and forth. And this global paint has very good coverage. Very good coverage. See how it covers? It'll cover in one application. Because the paint's very thick. It does not have the water in it anymore because the water has been replaced with extender. So think about this as your undercoating. Now this is going to be a wet into wet blending. That means I'm going to undercoat with this number 6 value gray. So I'm just going to, it's like base coating. Okay. Get that on there nice and smooth. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch out the excess paint out of my brush. You don't want to use water when you're using the global method in your brush because water is the solvent and it'll thin out the paint. You want this paint to stay nice and thick. Okay, I've got that nice and smooth. I'm going to pinch out my brush. And then I'm going to go into my light value number 8. And that might not show up too much. Let's see how well it shows up. I might have to brush mix some white into that. Oh yeah, that shows up fine. So what I'm doing is just see how I'm not using the tip of my brush. Using the tip of your brush, you're going to scrape paint off. You're going to blend on the side of your brush, and this is basically distributing the paint to the size area you want. I'm painting a sphere, so I've got my highlight in the upper right. After I get that distributed, that's when I pinch out the brush, pinch out the excess, to do your blending. Pinch the brush. Now my brush, see how I flattened it out. As I pinched it, I flattened the bristles out, nice and flat. My brush is going to go on the side again. When you blend on the side of the brush. I'm going to set my brush down about a 45-degree angle. Also, another important thing to remember when you're blending, do you see how far back I am on my handle? That loosens up your hand. It instead of being really tight. If I'm really tight, what I'm going to do is it's going to be hard for me to blend. I'm going to be probably using too much pressure, pulling the paint off too much. So I'm going to get back on the brush, and it's just a very soft touching of the two values together. And as soon as you put your hand down, as soon as you start moving the paint, you'll get paint on, like too much paint on your brush, and then I'm going to pinch it out as I blend. Come over to here. Do you see how my brush is half on one value and half on the other value? And I'm not going to go back to the center area. What I'm wanting to do is just soften the outer line. And how we refer to this outer line here, this division in values right here, separation in values, that is called an underblended line. So what we're doing is we're blending and softening those two values together, wet into wet. Pinch the brush, come around to this side. See, I'm just gently tugging on the paint. And as you see, I'm also following the shape of the highlight. I'm not like going across or pulling down. My brush has to go in the same direction. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of the underblended line's gone. I'm going to pinch out the brush, and I'm just going to very lightly tickle these edges to soften this. Now what else you can do to further refine this, I've got this blender brush, and you can barely touch this. Barely tap it, very gently. You can do this with a mop brush, you can do it with a blender, like this brush is a blender. You can also just continually pinch out your filbert brush and soften it, with your filbert brush. So I'm going to put in the dark. I'm going to go to the gray number 3, the filbert brush. Set this down. Might need a little more paint. See how you can't hardly see that. So this is my crescent shape. Okay, then I'm going to pinch out my brush. Remember, my bristles are going to be half on one value, half on the other value. And it's a soft, gentle tickling and pulling of the paint. One time it was explained to me, and this really helped me a lot, it was explained to me that anytime you're doing this, what I'm doing right now, is just the blending. That if you just take the brush on the back of your hand and just barely touch, so where you don't get paint on your hand, and that's the pressure that you use when you're at this stage of your blending. Now let's talk about another term that's called overblending. If I overwork this, and I'm just like blending, and I keep going, I keep pulling the paint out, and I keep pulling this paint in, and I just don't know when to quit. What happens is you lose value, because what I end up doing is I end up blending one into the other, and overblending and overworking. Next thing you know, I have a loss of value changes. I think you can see on your monitor there that I don't see much difference now between in this area. All looks pretty much the same. So if I was to be over blending, I'd probably just go in with a little more paint, a little darker value. I'm going to pick up a little bit of my black this time. See, here's my number 3. I've got a little black next to it. Going to add a little darker value because I overworked that last one. Remember, first you're going to apply, get it to the size you want, pinch out your brush, and remember to hold back on your handle so that you have a very soft touch of just softening these together. And do you see how I'm just, sometimes my brush is just barely hitting the surface when I'm doing this. And that is wet into wet blending. I can see a little bit of an underblended line here. So I pinched out the brush. I'm going to go back, tickle that a little more. And it should look like a smooth gradation of value scales. And there you go.